Namaste all, and welcome to our continuing series on the life divine with our beloved brother Ranga. We are continuing in the book on the supermind, mind, and the overmind Maya. We are on page 294, beginning with the line, "If we regard the powers of the reality as so many Godheads."
So, before we read this para, just to remind you that the overmind consciousness is the last plane of spiritual consciousness in the ignorance. Above the overmind, you enter into the supermind where knowledge becomes complete and ignorance ceases. Okay? So this is the dividing line between the two is the golden lid, which Mother broke in 1956.
Yes.
29th February 1956. And the supermind then descended into the physical world, but it got enclosed in matter. Now it has to, like a seed, now it has to sprout out when the conditions are ripe. No seed manifests easily without the right conditions. So the right conditions will come in due time, and what is already latent and the work has been done by Mother and Srimdu, it will come out. So this is, now he is going to describe the overmind level of consciousness. Okay, so this is what Srimdu realized in 1926, 24th November. His consciousness got stabilized in the overmind consciousness. Now it could not come below that level. Okay, even if he comes to reduce, to do some physical work or anything, it is by choice and by will, not by compulsion. Whereas yogis, they may mount up to a certain level, but they are bound to come down if the body-mind life is not very perfected. So this you keep in mind. So,
does this mean that when he was writing Savitri, towards the end, everything was in the overmind and above maybe?
Yes, and even in the supermind, some of it. Even in the supermind. The overmind was the minimum standard he made for Savitri. That's why he revised it also so much. Okay, so we start now. We know what the overmind consciousness is, and we will start from there. I'll read the whole para first, and then we'll come back to details. If we regard the powers of the reality as so many Godheads, we can say that the overmind releases 1,000,000 Godheads into action, each empowered to create its own world, each world capable of relation, communication, and interplay with the others. There are, in the Veda, different formulations of the nature of the gods. It is said that they are all one existence to which the sages give different names. Yet each god is worshipped as if he by himself is that existence, one who is all the other gods together and contains them in his being. And yet again, each is a separate deity, acting sometimes in unison with companion deities, sometimes separately, sometimes even in apparent opposition to other godheads of the same existence. In the supermind, all this would be held together as a harmonized play of the one existence. In the overmind, each of these three conditions could be a separate action or basis of action and have its own principle of development and consequences, and yet each keep the power to combine with the others in a more composite harmony. As with the one existence, so with its consciousness and force. The one consciousness is separated into many independent forms of consciousness and knowledge. Each follows out its own line of truth, which it has to realize. The one total and many-sided real idea is split up into its many sides. Each becomes an independent idea force with the power to realize itself. The one consciousness force is liberated into its million forces, and each of these forces has the right to fulfill itself or to assume, if needed, a hegemony and take up for its own utility the other forces. So too, the delight of existence is loosed out into all manner of delights, and each can carry in itself its independent fullness or sovereign extreme. Overmind thus gives to the one existence consciousness bliss the character of a teeming of infinite possibilities, which can be developed into a multitude of worlds or thrown together into one world in which the endlessly variable outcome of their play is the determinant of its creation, of its process, its course, and its consequence. Srimada's language is very, very condensed and very pregnant is the word I can use for his. So,
and exact.
So we'll have to bring out that which is pregnant, we'll have to give it birth by discussion. Okay, so now, to remind you, as I said just now, the supermind is a very difficult consciousness to reach. It's not that anybody has reached permanently there. The Vedic rishis have realized it. Maybe some of the others also have had touches of it. Srimada also was often in the supermind consciousness. But nobody until now has been able to stabilize themselves permanently in the supramental consciousness.
How many in the ashram touched it?
I don't know. Even the overmind is a little doubtful. In fact, there is a joke about that. Someone claimed that he was in the overmind consciousness. Okay, so, and he is passed away now, so I can tell him. And he thought that he had reached such a level of consciousness that he proposed to Srimado that you and I can now run the ashram together. Okay, and finally he had to leave the ashram and go away. He became a little, he didn't go mad. He did come, he came afterwards, he came back to the ashram later on and I even met him. Yeah. He had the experience of Ananda, that he had. So anyway, so Amal Kiran with his wit, okay, he coined a spiritual epitaph for him. You know what an epitaph is? The message on the tombstone. So he said, Govind Bhai Patel, undermined by the overmind. So, your question as to how many have reached, I don't know.
It was rhetorical.
I think the person about whom I'm talking is Govind Bhai Patel, but may have been somebody else also. I may be mistaken. Maybe it was somebody else. Okay? I'm not sure. We'll have to check that. I'm not sure. But Govind Bhai Patel was one of those who also went away. He had difficulties and he went away. He came back. And even when he went back to Gujarat, he had many experiences. So now let's get back to our... So the overmind is the consciousness where the multiplicity starts. In the supermind, you have multiplicity as well as oneness. You see the unity of things, the seed, and that seed starts breaking up into various different things, so that potentially the superman mind contains the one in fullness, but also contains the multiplicity in seed form. You can say that. But the moment the consciousness descends into the overmind, the multiplicity becomes a living fact. And that's why you have Srimada saying, million Godheads into action. the overmind releases a million Godheads into action. Now, what is this Godhead? This you have to understand. There is a very interesting principle. Whatever impersonal forces are there in the physical world, okay, there is always a personal representation to it. Somewhat like a kingdom, and there is a king representing it. So the king or the prime minister represents the country. The country is the collectivity and the impersonal aspect. Okay? India, but there is a head. So the king, this fact is there even in the universe and at all the planes of consciousness also. So for everything, there is a Godhead. And this Godhead is a living entity. It's a real entity. You can have communication with them. Okay? Don't think there is some abstract idea. Okay? So, suppose you have wind. There is a wind god. The Maruts and the Marut is the wind god. Then there is a God for the ocean, the vastness. So all these impersonal aspects, there is always a personal aspect. And they all live in the overmind consciousness. Okay?
But when we speak of the Godhead, is there a negative, a darkness to any of these Godheads?
No, they are at that level, they are half semi-divine, more than divine.
But when we have darkness here,
there is no darkness there.
There's no representative.
No, there is no. Oh, I see. Well, you have Yama, okay, who is the god of death.
Yes.
And there is Diti and Aditi. Aditi is the mother who gives birth to the gods, and Diti is the one who gives birth to the asuras. There is a difference. Okay, so it's an interesting thing what you are asking, but there is a connection. Okay. So, even at the highest level, the divine can be personal as well as impersonal. So, this million Godheads now Srimla is discussing very interestingly at the overmind level. Into action. Each God is empowered to create his own world. Each world capable of relation, communication and interplay with the others. Now, note that. So, million gods, two gods can communicate with each other. They can have a relation and they can also, there is an interplay of their connection. This is possible, it starts at the overmind level. When there is a oneness, there can be no relation, there can be no communication and there can be no interplay. There is only one. How can there be an interplay? But at the overmind level, this starts. Relations and communications and interplay. And what is the nature of that? There are three things he has mentioned. One is that two Godheads can work in unison. They can work in harmony. Or the two gods can, we'll read out those possibilities. Okay, so communication, interplay with the gods. It is said that they are all one existence to which the sages give different names. He has put it in English, and the ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti. The truth is one, but the wise men speak of it as many. That's what he's saying. So, although it is one, all the Godheads are essentially one, and yet they are different. Okay? Even in the physical world, we have examples of that. Isn't it? Very, very gross examples also. You will see that there is a oneness as well as there is a difference. Take any fruit from different plants. Take pineapples. Okay? They are all different. And yet essentially they are one. Exactly in the same way. Take any species. They are all one essentially in one species. They are all, say, horses. So horseness is common to them. So there is a oneness and there is a difference also among each horse. There is a difference. It's the same with human beings. Okay? So this is what he means by they are all, they are in the way different formulations of the same nature of the gods. It is said that they are all one existence to which the sages give different names. Yet each god is worshipped as if he by himself is an existence. One who is all, one who is all the other gods together or contains them in his being. This is why Agni sometimes is worshipped separately, but sometimes he contains all the other godheads in himself. Okay? And sometimes the other godheads contain Agni. This is possible at that level. Yeah. So, one who is all the other gods together or contains them in his being. And yet again, each is a separate deity acting sometimes in unison with companion deities. This is the first one. Sometimes separately. Each one will be acting separately or in harmony with each other, cooperation. Okay? Then there will be, or there may be no cooperation, but apparent opposition. Why is Srivda saying apparent? Because there is basically harmony. So, although you can have two different types of actions which seem to be contradictory, they are essentially not in clashing.
Can you tell us something about those working in harmony?
Yes. The best example is the orchestra. The orchestra, there are 100 instruments, each one playing something else. Okay? So, but yet there is perfect harmony. So that's a good example of this.
But what about the gods working in harmony?
Pardon?
The gods working in harmony.
Yes, that's right. It doesn't happen at our level, but it can happen there at that level. Okay? Even when they are doing different works, they are complementing each other and they are not, that's why Srivda is using the word apparent opposition. Okay? So, and yet again is separate, sometimes in unison. The word unison is very interesting. Unison actually refers to sound. Okay? When you are singing together and you are in the same pitch, you are singing in unison. It's different from unity. Okay, it's different. So unison. In other words, what you are doing, the two are at the same pitch and the same in harmony. So, with companion deities, sometimes separately and sometimes even in apparent opposition to other gods of the same existence. He has given you three possibilities. In the supermind, all this would be held together as a harmonious play of the one existence. In other words, all the three possibilities are perfectly compatible with each other. But in the overmind, the compatibility starts becoming less. That's what he's going to tell you. Okay? So, in the supermind, all this would be held together as a harmonized play of the one existence. Note the word harmonized play. So there is a difference, there is a play. Okay? And that play can be working in harmony, working separately, or working in apparent opposition. That's a play. Okay? But in the supermind, it is harmonized. There is no clash. Okay? So, of the one existence, in the overmind, each of these three conditions could be a separate action or basis of action and have its own principle of development and consequences, and yet each keep the power to combine with the others in a more composite harmony. So, all the different philosophies, all the different ideas, all the possibilities that are there start at the overmind level. That's what he's saying. Take even, very simple, take political theories. Monarchy, democracy, okay, oligarchy, aristocracy, all different ways of governing. But they are all there, and in the supermind they are perfectly harmonious with each other. But in the overmind, they have a right to become quite separate and even opposite. So they come down and each one is given the right to express itself fully. That's what he's saying. Okay? It's clear, no? So, and the overmind is the origin of all this separation. That is the reason why Sri Aurobindo says that separation and multiplicity you could define as ignorance. Ignorance, don't give it a negative connotation. Think of it as a definition for seeing the many. we would give it a negative connotation. But the divine doesn't give it a negative connotation. Okay? He can see the one, but he also wants to see the many. There's nothing wrong in it. He wants to see it in a different way. And that's what we see. But we are so used to seeing the many that we want to see and we see this as a limitation. But for the divine, it's not like that. Okay, so we come to so in the overmind, all these three conditions, working separately, working in harmony, working in opposition, they become the origin of all these movements are in the overmind, and when they come down here, they become different. And that's why there is so much of clash between different. It becomes open clash. But there is no clash at the overmind level. There are only possibilities quite compatible with each other, not as much as in the supermind, but quite compatible with each other.
When Sri Aurobindo speaks of evil, and I've done quite a study on it, he says there is no evil in the divine.
Yeah.
But there is on earth.
There is?
On earth there is much evil.
Yeah, because the distortion becomes complete. So evil is nothing but the distortion of the truth. That, again, we can explain it this way. When the one becomes the many, it subjects itself to three limitations. He has spoken about that elsewhere. The first is that one consciousness can station itself at various levels. It would be like you have a 7-storied house and you can live on the 7th floor, you can live on the 5th floor, you can live on the 6th floor without change of nature. That's one possibility that it has. The Supreme Consciousness has got that possibility. The second is that it has the power to change its nature according to the level at which it is. Okay? So at the highest level, purity. At the lower levels, it becomes less pure, less pure, less pure, less pure. So the truth starts becoming distorted here. And the third possibility is it can limit itself. He speaks about this elsewhere, and it can limit itself. So these three possibilities you have to take into account. So the truth becomes darker and darker and loses its character and stations itself at the lowest level as though it is the opposite of itself. That's why good becomes evil. Evil is nothing but a shadow, a reflected shadow of truth. Like light and darkness. Light and darkness also, we have to understand that they are not opposites. We see them as opposites and that is valid here. But it is not opposite. It's a limitation of light. The usually example we give in, if you are sitting in the theater, okay, and before the program starts, the lights are all full, lights are on. But the bell rings and the program is about to start, the lights are dimmed. It is still light. Dimmer, 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 dimmer. Complete darkness. So, when it is semi-dark, you would still call it light. When it is almost dark, you would still call it light. The light is very weak, you will say. So, when it becomes 100% dark, why don't you call it light? So, it is light which has reduced itself. So, that is how you have... But this truth is not available here. It is available there. At our level, these are opposites. And we have to work on the basis of there being opposites. Okay? So, there is a chapter in the Synthesis of Yoga where it says standards of conduct. So, at each level, the laws that operate there are valid at that level. You can't apply the laws of another level to this level. You can't do that. They are valid. Okay? So, we go to the next sentence. Each of these three conditions could be separate or basis of action and have their own principle of development and consequences, and yet each keep the power to combine with the others in a more composite harmony. So, Srimda also explains the difference between the different philosophies, the Advaita, the Vishishta Advaita, and the Dvaita. He says they are all from different levels they are seeing, and all of them have got a truth. It's not that they are. And at the overmind level, the origin of all these differences are there. Advaita, oneness, essentially oneness. Vishishta Advaita, oneness as well as difference. And Dvaita, there is a basic difference between the individual soul and the divine soul. You can have a relation with the divine, but you can't become the divine. Okay, so all this is originating in the overmind level of consciousness. Okay, so as now, he is going to tell you this action of the one becoming the many acts on consciousness, it acts on force, and it also acts on Ananda. Why? Sat, Chit, Ananda. So it acts on all the three. That's what he's going to tell you one by one. Okay? As with the one existence, when he uses the word existence, he means Sat, he means substance. Okay? So with the consciousness and force. What happens with the substance also happens with consciousness and force. The one consciousness is separated into many independent forms of consciousness and knowledge. Very easy to understand. Our consciousness is quite different from the animal consciousness. The animal consciousness is quite different from the worm consciousness. Okay? And the yogis are at a different consciousness. So the consciousness becomes many types. That's basically what he's saying. Okay? So, and then each follows out its own line of truth which it has to realize. The one total and many-sided real idea is split up into its many sides. Real idea also we have discussed many times, but I see some new faces. So
Yes.
we'll just give a brief idea of what the real idea is. In the physical world, when you want to do something, you want to build a house, okay? Or you want to start an institution. Somebody wants to start a university, okay? You start with an idea. What do I want to produce and how will I do it? So you plan, okay? You have a plan. And this plan, and then you go about executing it. Now, in the physical world, you may have a plan which is easy to execute. You may have a plan which, with difficulty, you are executing. You may have a plan which is not very easy to execute, it may fail. But in the supermind, the plan of everything that has to be built in the physical world is bound to become a reality. That's why he calls it the real idea. It's clear? At our level, our idea may not be real in that sense. But in the supermind and the overmind, all the seed ideas which are there, which manifest in the physical world, are real. They become exactly what they're intended to be.
Is the real idea and the Gnostic identical in similarity in terminology to the supermind? Is the real idea the supermind?
Yes. Yes. All the real ideas are in the supermind. Okay? So now that's what he's saying. Okay? So, the one consciousness is separated into many independent forms of consciousness and knowledge. Each follows out its own line of truth which it has to realize. The one total and many-sided real idea is split up into its many sides. Okay? This you can also understand if you picture to yourself the prism. Okay? White light is one, but when it hits a prism, it breaks up into 7 colors. So this one becoming the many, that also is a good example to understand how it becomes the many. Okay? Each follows its own line which is realized. The one total and many-sided real idea is split up into many sides. Each becomes an independent idea force with the power to realize itself. There you are. So every idea that is there, it has the power to realize itself. You have democracy, you have communism, you may think it to be wrong, but it has the power to become fully what it wants to be. Okay, so even what about the phenomenon of the Nazis? Okay, even that had the power to realize itself fully. So all the so-called differences that are there, each one has got the right to fulfill itself. Now, you may wonder why it is like that, and why is, or a question can be put in this way, why is God permitting evil? He is not permitting evil. He is only producing infinitely. And when you are producing infinitely, if you produce A, there is nothing to stop you from producing minus A. If you are producing X, there is nothing to stop you from producing minus X. So, all the dualities come into play. He is not producing evil. You are seeing it as evil. He is only different. He is creating all the possibilities that exist and don't exist also. He is going to create everything. Okay? So, this is what he is saying. So, to realize itself, see that sentence again, each becomes an independent idea force with the power to realize itself. What you feel is something negative, is not negative. It has the power to realize itself. The one consciousness force is liberated into its million forces, and each of these forces has the right to fulfill itself or to assume, if needed, a hegemony and take up for its own utility the other forces. This is very interesting. One idea can dominate the other ideas and subjugate them. That also is possible. Okay, it's like Germany in the Second World War conquering France and Austria and Poland and trying to even occupy Russia. It had the power to do that for a certain time. Okay, so this is what Swami is saying, but this can apply also in ideas. Okay, the idea of democracy is now sweeping the world. Okay, and although it's a very defective idea, still it is sweeping the world. It is dominating all the other ideas. Monarchy and autocracy, it's all overshadowing and saying, no, democracy should be the real. So that's what Swami is saying here. It has the idea, he's using the word hegemony. Okay, so, so if needed, a hegemony to take up for its own utility the other forces. So, now he is talking of Ananda. So the delight of existence is loosed out into all manner of delights, and each can carry in itself its independent fullness or sovereign extreme. So you may feel that delight is one, but there can be different types of delights. In fact, Swami has listed in the record of yoga, he has listed many types of Ananda. Okay, I just mentioned to you. Kamananda, okay, Haitukananda, Ahaitukananda, Raudrananda, Vaidyutananda. So many different types of Anandas can be there. Electrical Ananda, okay, and body Ananda, vital Ananda, mental Ananda. So the one Ananda is expressing itself in so many different ways. So the one becoming the many. The principle of one becoming the many is applied to substance, which is existence. It is applied to consciousness, applied to force, and now he is applying it to Ananda also. This is something you will see in Sri Aurobindo all the time. He is constantly discussing all the four aspects. Sat, Chit, Shakti, Ananda. Okay? You don't see that but if you read carefully, you will see that every time he is dealing with all. Okay? So, now we come back to what he is saying. So too the delight of existence is loosed out in manner of delights, and each can carry in itself its independent fullness or sovereign extreme. Each one has got the right to extreme itself and go the whole distance. Experiment. Nature is doing that. It's experimenting all the time with all sorts of things. Things which it finds that it has exhausted itself, it rejects. But it goes on. Overmind thus gives to the one existence, consciousness bliss, the character of a teeming of infinite possibilities, which can be developed into a multitude of worlds or thrown together into one world in which the endlessly variable outcome of their play is the determinant of the creation, of its process, its course and its consequence. So Srimad is saying that this one Satchidananda can express itself in different worlds also. our creation, the world we live in, is not the only possible creation. It could have been many other types of creation also, where the laws would be different.
So we get into extraterrestrials.
Yes, that's right.
And they may have that honor
Yes.
also.
It's very possible that 20,000 light years away, there is another type of creation altogether. It's very possible.
But doesn't Mother say that this is the only creation in which evolution is possible? Human evolution.
Does he say that? He says it is a crucial. It's a significant center. That's a word used. The earth is a significant center for the evolution. I don't think they have said that this is the only place where evolution is possible. I'm not sure. And if he has said that, I would like to see the...
Okay, I'll find it.
Yeah.
Evolution into the supermind and above.
Yeah.
Okay.
So...
Anmol?
I remember that this is the place where the evolution is concentrated, and whatever gains are made here, they are like distributed everywhere else. So that means that other places are also gaining. It's just that this is the point of concentration. This is what I remember.
So, significant center is the word I used.
That's a good term.
These are Sridhar's words, not mine. Significant center.
The divinization of the body is the main purpose of earthly life.
Here, in our creation, that's a purpose. Okay, so that completes the paragraph. Now, since the consciousness force of the eternal existence is the universal creatrix, the nature of a given world will depend on whatever self-formulation of that consciousness expresses itself in that world. Equally, for each individual being, his seeing or representation to himself of the world he lives in will depend on the poise or make which that consciousness has assumed in him. Our human mental consciousness sees the world in sections, cut by the reason and sense and put together in a formation which is also sectional. The house it builds is planned to accommodate one or another generalized formulation of truth, but excludes the rest and admits some only as guests or dependents in the house. Overmind consciousness is global in its cognition and can hold any number of seemingly fundamental differences together in a reconciling vision. Thus, the mental reason sees person and the impersonal as opposites. It conceives an impersonal existence in which person and personality are fictions of the ignorance or temporary constructions. Or, on the contrary, it can see person as a primary reality and the impersonal as a mental abstraction or only stuff or means of manifestation. To the overmind intelligence, these are separable powers of the one existence which can pursue their independent self-affirmation and can also unite together their different modes of action, creating both in their independence and in their union different states of consciousness and being, which can be, all of them, valid and capable of coexistence. A purely impersonal existence and consciousness is true and possible, but also an entirely personal consciousness and existence. The impersonal divine, Nirguna Brahman, and the personal divine, Saguna Brahman, are here equal and coexistent aspects of the eternal. Impersonality can manifest with person, subordinated to it as a mode of expression. But equally, person can be the reality with impersonality as a mode of its nature. Both aspects of manifestation face each other in the infinite variety of conscious existence. He is now discussing only the two opposites of personality and impersonality. We had a big, brief glimpse of that. The impersonal forces are, examples are very easy. Wind, okay? The ocean, okay? A storm, okay? They are all impersonal forces. But there are personal representatives to each of these, okay? So this is, in fact, this is very interesting. Let me tell you, I don't know if you have heard of the Findhorn Garden. You have heard about it. Findhorn Garden is a community in Scotland, quite far up, and they try to live some sort of a moral life, semi-moral, semi-spiritual, but it's not a fixed thing. People come, go, and they live together. They believe in vegetarian food. So, I'm mentioning this because there was a lady there, her name was Dorothy. And she was capable of communicating with the personal aspect of each vegetable. Okay, so it was a very interesting thing. And she used to talk to them. And let us say cauliflowers, okay? There is a deva. She used to call it the deva of the cauliflowers. Okay? And if you talk to them and have a good relation with them, you'll get a good crop. So, this is the interesting part, okay? So, in fact, even the animals, there is a king, okay? I don't know if you have heard the story, but, okay, I'll continue first with the Findhorn Garden. What happened one day, they found that rats are coming and eating up the vegetables. So this Dorothy was able to contact the king, the person aspect of the rat race. And she told him that, look, if you come and plunder our vegetables, we'll have to start capturing you and killing you maybe. So please don't do this. When this understanding with this king rat happened, they found that next day all these rats had gone into the next neighboring garden. So I mentioned this because of the aspect of personal and impersonal. Okay? So again I'll give you another instance of personal and impersonal. This is very interesting here. The Ramakrishna and Totapuri, this is a very interesting story of personal and impersonal. That we'll come to a little later. But you have heard of Sadguru, na? So he says there's only an impersonal aspect of the divine. He doesn't even use the word divine. He says you must develop your full potentialities. Okay? But there is no God. God is your own imagination. Buddha also says the same. There is no personal God. Jiddu Krishnamurti says the same thing. He says the same thing. There is no God. It's your own imagination. But is that true? No. There is a personal God. The best example is Ramakrishna. Okay? And this Totapuri. Now we can, if we have got 5-10 minutes,
yes,
we can tell the story because it's a very interesting story and it's really very interesting. Ramakrishna was always worshipping the divine in the form of his mother because he had the image of Kali in his temple which Rani Rashmani had built. So he used to worship her and he wanted to see her. And he used to, once he achieved the divine sight, he was able to communicate with her and get guidance, personal guidance. Like a child, he would ask her, what should I do? What should I not do? Is this right? Is this wrong? Okay? Like that he used to go on asking. Okay? Like, there's a very interesting story also about somebody who challenged Ramakrishna and said, you are talking of the divine altogether, what can your mother do? Can she produce on that hibiscus plant? Can she produce their red flowers? Can she produce a white flower? So he comes to the mother and asks, he's saying like that, this fellow, oh, is it really true? Then the miracle happened, okay? Next day, there was a white flower on the red hibiscus tree. Okay. Now let me tell you something very interesting. When I read this, I saw the same phenomenon in our press garden. It happens. White hibiscuses can sometimes come on a red hibiscus plant. I was fascinated when I said that. My God, look at this.
I have seen it very often.
Yeah. So I mentioned this because of the personal aspect, okay? So he used to tell her, and he used to ask all these simple questions. Look, he's saying this, that you can't do this. Can you do it? He's asking her. Then, so he knew only the personal aspect of the divine. He didn't know the Nirguna Brahman. He didn't know what the vast, infinite, impersonal aspect is. So when Totapuri came, he had to teach him how to get the impersonal aspect of the divine. So he told him, sit down. And they used to sit in a hut. And he saw he said, concentrate here. Keep concentrating here. Okay? And he says, I am seeing only the image of my mother. I can't see anything else. Okay? Then this Totapuri gets angry and says, concentrate again, concentrate. When he gets frustrated, he takes a piece of broken pot, something, shard. Okay? He takes a piece and plunges it here into his forehead. Say, I told you to concentrate here. A little bit of blood also comes out. Okay? And he says, concentrate here. I am concentrating, but I can see only the form of my mother. Personal aspect. Then, Totapuri tells him, take the sword of knowledge in your hand and cut your mother into two. And he does that. And the moment he does that, his limitations disappear altogether and he shoots into the Nirvikalpa Samadhi, the impersonal aspect of the divine. It's a very interesting story. But this is what happened to him. So now he knows what is the Saguna Brahman and the Nirguna Brahman. There is a sequel to the story also, which is very interesting, because our Totapuri knew the Nirguna Brahman, but he didn't know the Saguna Brahman. Okay? So, the sequel to the story is that one day Ramakrishna said, okay, you have taught me the impersonal aspect of the divine. He didn't say that exactly, but he must have thought, I'll teach you the personal aspect of the divine. So, one day he gets a severe stomachache. This Totapuri was a semi-naked man. He used to wear only a loincloth. Okay? And he had a very severe stomachache. By the way, even physical pain can be so much that you want to commit suicide. Okay? So he wanted to go and drown himself in the Hooghly river. So, because Dakshineshwar is on the Hooghly river, on the bank. So,
Ganga.
No, Hooghly.
Hooghly. It's a Hooghly.
It's in Calcutta.
Yeah.
I've been there.
Hooghly is a branch of the Ganga. So this fellow is going to drown himself. I can't bear this pain. So wherever he's going, it's only knee-deep water. And Ramakrishna is sitting on the bank and enjoying himself and saying, so, why don't you pray to the Divine Mother personal aspect? Then you will get rid of this problem. So this is the personal aspect and the impersonal aspect. So Srimda wants you to realize both. Both are true. It's not that only one aspect is true. But it's interesting that so many, Buddha, okay, not Shankara. Shankara did not see, he saw both. But Jiddu Krishnamurti, okay, then our Sadguru, they all say only the impersonal aspect is the divine. Because they have not gone beyond a certain level.
But the Sadguru is building statues of Shiva and...
Yeah, so, but when he speaks, he is saying like this. So maybe he believes. But the video that we are seeing, he is saying that.
I have seen him in one video where he is worshipping the Jyotirling at Kedarnath. And he is just, bursting with tears.
Yes.
So that means he has a very strong personal connect with Shiva.
Quite possible. But then, that one video which we have seen, he is going on saying that. Maybe it was an earlier thing, and now he knows. Okay, but Jiddu Krishnamurti, no. He stuck to his, there is no personal divine. There is only the impersonal divine.
But he was all in the mind.
Huh?
He was all mind.
Ah.
Krishnamurti.
Yeah.
All here, up here.
He had made his mind silent. He had managed to make his mind silent. And he used to use the word tabula rasa. Okay? Make your mind absolutely like a blank slate. He used to insist on that. Okay, I think we have to stop here.
Any other questions before we close? Wonderful.
So we'll finish this para next time.
Very good.
And Shraddha is discussing here the impersonal and the personal aspect of the end. Both are true. Just like for what is true of Brahman, personal and impersonal, is true of everything. Okay.
Namaste, all. Thank you.